How many Christians would say that Jesus Christ failed? I'd be willing to bet that none of them would. I mean, how can you be a Christian following after Christ if you believe that his life was a failure? And how do we know that he didn't fail? Well, I think it's because he told us what he came to earth to do, and we can read exactly what he did. For example, he came to earth to seek and save the lost. He came to die for our sins and open the way and also become the way back to God. He came to defeat Satan and death. So anything that stands against us is now leveled. There is nothing that can be used against us to separate us from the love of God. Now, did he do these things? Did he accomplish these things? Well, I think we see from Scripture not only what he said and claimed, but also what the disciples believed after his resurrection that he absolutely did. He did, in fact, raise from death, defeating death and the grave. He did overcome the world. He did die in our place, satisfying the price that sin held over us. He tore the veil so that we can come boldly before the throne of grace. He did all of these things. So, generally speaking, we would all say that Jesus succeeded. He had victory. But what's interesting is that there is something else that Jesus did that we would never say negated his victory. I think rightly so. We would not say that this thing negates his victory. But when we find ourselves in very similar situations, we often feel like failures. We'll even tell ourselves that we have failed if we find ourselves in this same scenario. This is a part of Jesus' story that has always really confused me. It reads like, it's just a very odd account, and it reads like something that I've always kind of questioned, like, what's the reason? Why did the biblical authors feel like this needed to be in here? Why did God inspire them to write down that this happened in 3 of the gospel accounts? I don't really understand it fully. It strikes me as something that there's just a little bit more going on. Now, we'll read through it in a bit, and you'll say, well, it's probably recorded because it happened. Yes, I do believe that. I believe that it happened. But what was the lesson behind it? What was the message? When you hear it, it reads as something that's like, that seems like almost an aside that I wonder about. I just wonder, what is the purpose of this? I'm not saying that what I have for you today is going to explain that perfectly, though I do think it makes some sense of maybe a larger purpose for this story. But I'll look into like there's a lot of writings about this, which I realize you don't even know the story yet, but there's a lot of writings about this in the Apocrypha and some commentaries on apocryphal works. And it leads to like some really weird doctrinal stuff that I'm like, okay, well, I don't think that's true. Like they'll tell the story, but then they'll give like some sub meaning behind it or something. And I'm like, I don't know. That feels a little sketchy to me. I'll hear like pastoral expositions on this verse, and a lot of times it seems like it's so hyper spiritualized that it kind of does away with the story. Like the story becomes secondary, and the thing they're trying to draw out of it really seems like they're reading into it a little bit more, and their message becomes the story rather than the story kind of taking the focus still. Now, like I said, my explanation might also not be complete. There might be more going on literarily. There might be more going on contextually that I just don't understand. However, I believe the lesson we're going to draw out is true, and I think it is something that God desires to communicate through this part of his word. So it rings true to me. It has explanatory power. I hope that you find that it does as well. Now, I realize we have not gotten to the story yet. Kind of an annoying tactic for an intro. We're still not going to get there yet. I'm going to save it for kind of a little bit down the road. Bear with me. We are going to get to the story, but it needs a little bit of setup first. Now, in Luke 9, verse 23, this is a pretty familiar verse for a lot of Christians. It says about Jesus, he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Okay, so we've talked about, did Jesus have success? Did he have victory, or was he a failure? We believe he had victory, and we believe that his greatest victory was done on the cross. So Jesus tells us to follow him in that victory, right? But what does it mean? What is my cross? That's very almost poetic language nowadays. But what is my cross? Well, we know what Jesus was thinking of physically, right? We know what a cross is. We know that's how he died. But what does it mean for us? How do we take up our cross daily? Obviously, he means something deeper here, because the cross was not a thing that you could take up daily. It was a thing that you died on, and then that was it. There was no more days for you to take it up. So what is he talking about? This is an important saying. In my view, and I hope this resonates with you as well, the cross was the mission of Jesus on God's behalf. The cross was the picture of sacrifice and love for others. It was one of his most difficult struggles, and it was the place he even desired to turn back from, but instead persevered through. It was a place of it was the place of the greatest public shame, but also the greatest moral good. And it was where Jesus died so that other people can live. That is what the cross is. Now, what is that in your life? Well, we could ask ourselves kind of the reverse questions, right? Where is God calling me? What is he calling me to do? Where can I show love and sacrifice for others, even though it's incredibly difficult for me? Where do I struggle but need to push through rather than remaining in? What might be the thing that I know is right, but might not win me the praise of other people? Where can I live my life in service to God or others, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment, how it might serve me as well? Those things are your cross. That is your cross. We're looking definitionally at what the cross was, not the wood, not a death apparatus, but what does it mean for our lives? And I think these questions help us to narrow it down. If we really kind of take some time to sift through our own lives, ask ourselves those questions and figure out, okay, what in my life fits those things? There could be several things. I think there's a lot of different things. But why does this matter? Once we've figured out, okay, what is the thing that I need to pick up daily and follow after Christ? What is that thing that is representative of sacrificial love? What is that thing that is so unbelievably difficult, but it is in service to God and others? That matters. It is so important. And I think it's important because that cross is unbelievably heavy, and it is often the place like we feel as if we fail the most. That's kind of the last question we can ask ourselves. Where do you feel like you fail the most? That's the thing that you need to pick up daily. Don't just drop it. Don't let it crush you. Every single day you pick it up and you follow after Christ, crucifying that thing to the cross every single day. Now, to the world, and I would say probably to Satan, at least at some point along the line, it looked an awful lot like Jesus failed at the cross. It looked like failure. Maybe even, I would say, to his disciples, right? I mean, they fled. And so every single step that Jesus took from prison to Calvary probably looked like another nail in the coffin on all they had worked towards and hoped for. It looked like another step towards failure until at last he did die, and then it looked like everything was undone. Now, of course, those of us who live on the other side of the cross, of the resurrection, we see it a little bit different. We see that Jesus came through the other side, that he was resurrected. We look at the cross as the place of Christ's greatest victory. Of course, it was his greatest struggle. It was the heaviest thing he had to bear, and yet it was the place he won. And this makes sense, right? I mean, if I'm like a fighter in a ring and I go up against my greatest opponent and I win, well, that's my greatest victory. If I go up against my weakest opponent and I win, that's not my greatest victory. It's still a victory, but it's not the greatest one. The greatest one is where struggle and overcoming kind of collide, right? That's the place where victory happens, or great victory happens. Now, this is true. We know that the cross is the place of Jesus' victory, but it does not change the fact for our lives that the cross is heavy. And every single day we try to lift it, and every single day we probably feel like we fail. Now, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I especially feel like a failure. Not only that I carry heavy things and struggle under the weight of them, but I have days where I buckle under the weight. I have days where I can't do the thing that Jesus asked me to do. I feel as if I cannot pick up my cross. I cannot move it another inch. I continue to fall. I fall on my face. I feel ashamed and I feel stupid. And this is the place where I feel like a failure because I just simply don't have the strength to do what Jesus asked, to continue to carry it forward. And this is where our story about Jesus comes in that I think is so incredibly important. Now in John 19, verse 17, it says, Jesus, carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. But that's not the whole story. We could look at that and say, see, Jesus carried his cross. I need to carry my cross. I'm following in his footsteps. He had victory. I want to have victory. And yes, I have victory through him, but I still need to carry my cross. So I'm going to do it. And wherever I can't, that's where I fail. But in Luke 23:26, it says, and as they led him away, they seized one Simon of Cyrene who was coming in from the country and laid on him the cross to carry it behind Jesus. Now, this almost feels a little bit blasphemous to ask, I'm not going to lie, but I think it is a natural thing to have come to our minds. Jesus asked us to every single day pick up our cross and follow after him. But Jesus, in this section in Luke 23, is not lifting the weight of his cross. Clearly, something happened between John 19 and Luke 23 to the effect that Jesus was not carrying his cross, or was not at least bearing the full weight of it. How is that fair? Was he asking us to do something that he himself didn't even do? The answer is no, and that is the point. Jesus succeeded. None of us would look at this story and say, Jesus failed. Look, I thought he succeeded, but I forgot about this part. He clearly failed because, look, Simon is helping him to carry the cross. No, Jesus succeeded, and he didn't need to do it alone. Could God have just given him the strength in that moment, the healing to do this himself? Absolutely. Did he? No. Why? This is what we need to ask ourselves. And I think, at least in part, it's to show us that we can sometimes be hypocrites about ourselves. We can look to the story of Jesus and say he succeeded, but when we are in that same situation where we're carrying our cross, but we buckle and we fall and we need someone else to carry it with us or for us for a little while, we feel like a failure. We would never attribute that failure to Jesus, but we attribute it to ourselves. Jesus' strength as a physical man gave out in this moment, and he needed help. He did not need to carry his cross alone in order to have victory, and neither do we. That is such an important lesson. Now, first and foremost, our victory is in Jesus Christ. So if he won, if he had victory, that means we have victory imparted to us. I really don't want to go down this road of feeling like, oh, well, you can kind of get victory yourself if you just have enough grit and determination. No, absolutely not. Because Jesus lived and died and was raised again, we then can follow him from life to death to life again. Absolutely. He offered us that way. But we do need to still follow him. We have now committed our lives to Jesus Christ, and we say we want to follow after him, and that includes following him into death to self every single day. We follow that J curve from life to life again every single day. And this is important. But when we need help carrying those crosses, that is also okay. That is all right. When we need encouragement and strength and help, that is not failure. That's not the same as failure, no matter how much our inner voice tells us that it is, no matter how much we might feel like it is in a moment. That is not failure, because Jesus had the same happen for him, and he did not fail. So whatever the thing is that you labeled as the cross that you bear, that thing that is unbelievably difficult, that might not be glorious but is right, that place where you die to self and live for God and others, that thing that is so heavy that it feels like there's no possible way you can take another step, let alone carry it up a mountain or a hill or anything like that, the place that even feels like failure and separation from God that must be battled through rather than remained in. That is something that Jesus showed us is okay to have help carrying.